So hello, good afternoon. My name is Nneka McGregor, and I am the founder and executive director of an organization called the Women's Center for Social Justice, but we're better known as Women at the Center. It's a very unique, small nonprofit organization, small in number, but mighty in our power, that's created by and for women and trans-identified survivors of all forms of domestic violence or gender-based violence. On behalf of the Learning Network, I'd like to welcome everyone to our virtual forum, Looking Within, Anti-Black Racism and Gender-Based Violence. Looking Within, Anti-Black Racism and the Gender-Based Violence Sector in Canada. Our forum today is called Now What? Beyond Statements of Solidarity. We're going to begin our session with an opening ceremony and land acknowledgement by Elder Myrna Kiknosway. Myrna comes from the Walpole Island, Bikejwanong territory. She's been invited to the University of Western Ontario to assist students and staff in the area of cultural awareness, consultation and counseling. I'm going to hand it over to Myrna for the opening ceremony.
Ishkote makasan kwandish ni cause mondo dem. Bakajanan and Dunjaba. Budawarmi Odawa and Shnabi Kwandao. This week, Madewan. What I said to you is in Anishinaabe Moen is my original language. Although I am not fully fluent, I know the majority of it, but I am not fluent. My spirit name is Fire Moccasin Woman. I'm from the Loon clan. I acknowledge both my mother and my father. My father was Budawadami. My mother was Odawa. My mother's Crane clan and my father is Loon clan. I reside on Bikejwanong territory, which is the home of Three Fires people. And I'm also third degree Madewan. I'd just like to acknowledge the land that we are on. It's the home of the Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee people, the Lenni Lenape. And London also has the Adirondacks people. So this is the home territory of our ancestors, those ones that walked on this land before we came. Since the beginning of time, we have been here for hundreds and thousands of years. So I was looking at your words of within. So I'm asking you to go within right now, wherever you are, and close your eyes, focus on your breathing, because this kind of work is very important. And how we take care of ourselves is very important. And as I offer these words, think about what is going on within inside of you as a humankind. So just take a few moments. Abajuma shumas ishkote makasin kwendishnikas mondo dem. Bakajunan dunjaba. Budawadami odawa nishnabe kwandao. Nismi Madewan. Chimigach kashe manado. Chimigach Made manado. Chimigwach Nindawe Maganaduk. Say Chimigwach to you for coming this day, to opening up your hearts, your minds, and your spirits and your soul to do this work. Chimigwach for all the sky world, the earth plane and the underground, and all those Nokamasug and Mashomsug that walked here before us, and all of the ones who are coming behind us to live into the future. I say Chimigwech to you for the four colors of man, the yellow, the red, the black, and the white. Chimigwech for all of those ones that are watching over us this day, that are watching and taking care of us, that surround us with your unconditional love, your joy, your healing, your resiliency. As we look inside ourselves and as we breathe, I say Chimigwech to you for all you have given, the water we drink, the air we breathe, and the food we eat. Chimigwech for the sun that travels across the sky, for the earth, Aki, for the moon that watches over us at night, for all of those things that you have created for us humans. And to recognize as humans, we were the last ones to be here and placed on this earth. We're the last ones. We're the youngest. So I say Chimigwech to you, Kajemnado, for all of those things we have here to enjoy our life. The trees and the grasses, the medicines and the herbs, the songs, the ceremonies, the drums, the shakers of all of your children here. I acknowledge the East, the South, the West, and the North. Acknowledge all of those living things. Help us to protect what we have here, to acknowledge and harm nothing. I acknowledge the female life that is here. Acknowledge the male, because without the male and female, there is no life. Without water, there is no life. Without air or food, there is no life. So check out what's going on inside of you so that you can open up your heart, your mind, and your spirit to do this work. For the future of all of us on this creation is depending on each one of us. It's very dependent. We have that responsibility to take care of the earth, the sky, and the underground. I say Chimigwech for you, all of you who have come listening to learn, to open up what's inside of you, to help this earth become a better place to live for our children, our grandchildren, and those ones that are coming behind us. I say Chimigwech to you, Nikanagana. Thank you. Bamam Piminwa. Enjoy your day.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, Myrna, for that beautiful and grounding opening statement. It has, I think, set the tone for what's going to happen, not just today, but over the next couple of days. I also want to take a very quick moment to express my own personal gratitude to the spectacular Dr. Linda Baker and her equally spectacular team at the Learning Network for months of preparation to bring this event together. I really, really appreciate the work that you've done. And for me as a Black woman, and also as part of the committee that was bringing this together, to see it happening, right, in real time, we're here now. I'm just really, really grateful, Linda, and I want to thank you and your team for everything that you've done. Today's session is going to be 2 hours long. It's going to be a conversation between Dr. Rachel Zellers and Hirut Milaku. I'm going to do a very brief introduction of their extremely lengthy expertise and background. We just condensed it, tried to condense it very, very quickly because we want to hear everything that they have to say. I'm going to start with Dr. Rachel Zellers. Dr. Rachel Zellers is a lawyer and professor at St. Mary's University in the Department of Social Justice and Community Studies. She's a community organizer who recently co-founded the African Nova Scotian Freedom School. She also co-founded Black Lives Matter Solidarity Fund and has raised over $300,000 since March of 2020 for community members in need. She is the proud mother of Ade, Zora, and Shade. Next, joining her in the conversation is Hirut Milaku. Hirut is an emerging scholar and healthcare practitioner. The investigative and reporting work that she has done in the area of mental health and gender-based violence over the last 20 years has been used by many, including the United Nations. She's co-founder of the Third Eye Collective, a survivor-led organization for Black women who've experienced violence. Hirut credits her ancestors, distinctive background and identities as a Beta Israel, queer, mother of a gifted child who is differently abled. All of these are the reasons that keep her grounded and connected. I want to thank you to Rachel and Hirut, and I'm going to turn it over to the two of you now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. everything in me feels the care and the tenderness that was taken into planning for us to be here today. Nneka, thank you. Thank you to the organizers. Christopher and Joanne, we see you. We appreciate you. Thank you to our incredible tech support. Thank you to the folks that are holding the chat box and keeping things in order. And most importantly, thank you to Hirut. There's no one else that I would in the world want to be in conversation with today regarding what we'll talk about. So thank you, real gratitude. And I would be deeply amiss if I didn't just mention and offer gratitude to Myrna for grounding us with your words. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. I echo everything that Rachel said, a bit nervous, so I'm not gonna go name names, but I do value the openness and the invitation to be present and to speak something personal, but within the wider understanding of how we move and relate to the world. And so thank you to everyone for making this happen and for grounding us on this sacred land.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I know we wanted to start out just talking a little bit about Hirut when we were planning why we're having this conversation today, why this conversation is so deeply important and personal to both of us. Do you want to say a few things? I can tag team with you.
Yeah, so for me, it was very much, the conversation around gender-based violence, it didn't start yesterday, didn't start last summer. Us being Black didn't start yesterday, nor did it start last summer. And so it was very much about wanting to speak to these intersectional issues that we experience as Black women experiencing violence within the wider issues that are taking place in the world, but bringing it back to where our work has been very much at the center, at the home, and how the personal is very much political. And at the end, like, what does it mean after the statements have been issued? Our work with mothers, Black mothers and Black children has not stopped, hasn't paused, will continue on irrespective of what's going on in the world. But what felt urgent to me was really centering and bringing attention to this really tender home space as part of the wider conversation. And so this is why I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. Mm-hmm. What about you?
Well, I mean, you named the home space, absolutely. I mean, this conversation is important to me because I know that our work, and one of the things we wanted to talk about today was what it means to co-parent with an abuser who you share a home space with. We wanted to talk about what it means to raise children in a home with an abuser. I have very personal connections to gender-based violence in my home and with very beloved friends who I grew up with, went to college with, that will, I'm sure, find their way into our conversation. And then we also wanted to put this conversation in the context of what's been happening over the last 10 months, particularly as the discourse around prison abolition and defunding the police has entered the mainstream in ways that we could have never imagined prior to 10 months ago. So I think those are the reasons why. One of the things that we also talked about was starting today with some grounding work. So I want to check in with you to see if there are things that you'd like to add to this question about why this conversation before we take a few minutes and offer a grounding exercise to folks who are with us today.
I'm so glad that you asked. A key thing I forgot to mention is that this conversation might be very triggering for some people. I will be talking about my experience of rape and co-parenting with the man who raped me, and the mothering aspect of that. So just if it's too much for people, totally understand, and could always come back to the recording at a later time at a pace that's more comfortable to you. So the self-care and this is important, I think, to myself. So I'm glad that we're going to be doing some of the grounding activity, and also to the participants who are listening, and just remember to just take care of yourself during this conversation as well.
Perfect. So let's start. This was this is part of my ongoing practice as I'm learning about somatics, which has been a technique of survival for me, engaging our work. But I want to just ask folks to lean back in their chairs. You can keep your eyes open, you can close them. If this is a good time to mute yourself if you're not muted. And I want you to just really lean back into whatever space you're sitting in. If you're on the floor, cross your legs, but find something to really rest your back on, a chair or wall. If you're on the floor, you may even take this opportunity to lay down. And I want you to just really settle. I want everyone to take just a deep breath in and let it out slowly. Wherever you are, if you're sitting or on the floor, I want you to pay attention to anything that may be tingling inside of your body. Over the years, when we've gathered to meet as a collective, that tingling sensation always starts in my belly. So I'm paying attention to that tingling sensation. Wherever you feel that tingliness in your body, take another deep breath into that place. Hold it, and then just let it out really slowly. How are your fingertips feeling? Do you feel warmth inside of your hands? Focus on where there may be warmth in your body right now, in your toes, in your heels, in your thighs. And just really pay attention to all the places in the body where there may be some tingliness, but also where there may be some warmth and real ease. Go ahead and just draw in another slow breath. Maybe even count through it to 6. And when you exhale, let it go just as slowly. One more time, take a nice, slow inhale, maybe counting to 6. And then release it just as slowly. Don't rush that breath. Let it come out really slowly. Thank you for indulging me, in part to settle my own body. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hirut, how are you?
I feel like I need some music.
You can't have music now.
Well, I'm just like, if the tech people have some of this Nina Simone Sea Lion woman, I just would like to bring her into our space. She does that. She grounds me as well. I not in tech people. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, so maybe at a later time, but I just yeah.
I got you.
All right. Okay, let's shake it up a little bit more.
Yeah. All right. All right. Sheila Moon, she drink coffee, she drink tea, and then go home. Sheila Moon, dressed in green, wear silk stockings with golden seams. Sheila Moon, dressed in red, make a man lose his head. Sheila woman, black dress on for $1,000. She wails and she moans.
Thank you.
Thanks, our tech folks. Thank you so much.
I know that wasn't part of the
Girl, that was not
schedule.
planned. No, it wasn't.
I know. But you know, I'm usually all about meditation and quiet space and all of that. But
yes, you are, and your silent retreats, girl. Lord have mercy.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, thank you.
Yeah. So
thank you.
Nina is someone I wanted to invite into our space, just because of her brilliance and also her story of how she's like one of us in so many ways. So we're not in this alone. There are many people before us, and so yeah.
Thank you. We decided that we would start talking about this interview that you and I were asked to do about 2 years ago. And the interviewer was, just asking us about how the Third Eye Collective came together. And I was listening to you share your story, and it made me realize after we were finished that I actually needed to sit down and interview you, something I'd never done in all the years that I'd known you. In that interview, you said something that really serves as the foundation for our conversation today. When the interviewer asked you about how our work initially began, you spoke about your abuser, also a person who you continue to co-parent with. And you said to him, I really wanted him to be healed, not punished. And I couldn't stop thinking about those words for days afterwards. They're words that I still think about. What's really significant about those words to me is that you offered them against a backdrop of continuing violence, violence that was happening then, a continuing story of harm, and things that we really didn't discuss in that interview. And it really struck me that that's where you went. This idea, this response that you just wanted him to be healed and not punished. There was real generosity in your words, in your ability to even feel them in your body, blew me away. And I know you didn't intend them to have that impact on me, but I really can't think of any better expression to signify or encapsulate the outcome of all of our work together over the years. We are transformative justice practitioners, which we'll talk about in some time. And one of the things that I sat with after that interview was how grateful I felt that I get to be the person bearing witness to and learning from your personal transformation. we often don't talk about the ways in which this work has transformed us. I think we've gotten better in the last year or two about that. But you have really taught me, our work together has taught me exactly what transformative justice is, which is to say, to be transformed in the work. I want to start our conversation today with those words. I wanted him to be healed and not punished. And just ask you to reflect upon, I mean, not just for me, but for everyone, where those words came from. What in you would feel after being harmed, after being raped, a desire for the person who had harmed you to be healed and not punished?
Yeah. So the whole idea of transformative justice, I had no idea. So we're talking about maybe about 12 years ago, over 10 years ago, and where I had the idea of what harm and healing was, but without having had the analysis of abolitionism or transformative justice to frame it, or within the context of other people. I didn't know anything about intimate partner violence. So this was just me as an individual working through how I understand the world. And also just having been a witness to violence growing up in a very small community, and having witnessed how a family whose daughter was raped by someone within the same circle, by another relative, how they were very badly treated and blamed and shamed, while the perpetrator kind of went about his business and his life. There was no disruption to his life. So my early understanding of violence and rape was kind of like in this distorted understanding of what happens, and that there was no healing for that family. There was no healing for that girl, and that it was like blame and shame. And so I didn't have any example either from being involved in school or from being involved in the social activists, the Black social conscious of what happens in intimate partner and with intimate partner violence. Like, I had a good analysis of what happens in the world, but I really didn't have anything to guide me when it came to me. I didn't have any examples. There was no one around me of all the progressive conversations that was actually taking place about, like, well, what do you do? And it just, all I knew was that as a mother, that my children needed to have a healthy relationship with their father in order for them to be healthy, and that whatever not disruption, but whatever led to him violating me, that needed to be addressed and healed, so that my children are not benefiting, but being impacted by the violence in the same way. And so in the same way that I saw my responsibilities, like, I have to find a way to deal with this trauma, and I have to heal myself, that he also has to do the same, get help, get at the root cause of what's happening, for the sake of, at the very least, the children, so that this intergenerational violence is not going to be passed to them and they were not going to be traumatized. And so, because it was someone who was my best friend, and someone who was very much politically aligned to me, just, a prominent man in the Black community, has done his own contributions, like, just very, like, publicly. He was just, well, and I thought we were on the same way of thinking. And so when it came, I thought it would be obvious that he would do what I was doing for myself, help myself. Let's get at the root cause of what we talk about always in society, and so that there is a transformation and this does not repeat itself. So I leaned into compassion, because compassion is action. And I did not want to punish him. I did not want to shame him. I was invested in having ongoing healthy relationship with him. And so that was it, but I was wrong. He was not in the same way as me. He was not thinking that way. And so I stayed with him, and I didn't know that there were other alternatives. And so in some way, I think like I did protect his image. I did not share with my family what was going on, again, because coming from a small community, I didn't want my kids to grow up hearing this about their father. So there was a lot of calculation as to like, well, how do I protect the children? And so, yeah, I think that was it. It's just like I protected him, gave him time, and thought like by modeling what I was doing to heal myself, that he would do the same. But we never moved past that point, and the violence continued in other forms, no longer physical, but the violence continues because it was never addressed.
I'm using my bifocals for the first time today because my vision is getting bad. Thank you for sharing those things. I really want to honor all that it takes for you to say the words that you said. And I want to tell you how radical I think it is that still something in you saw compassion as like the only viable response or option after your assault. That will always continue to blow me away. One of the things that I'm thinking about, and I was thinking about in preparation for our conversation today, is my own home, which was a home that had lots of violence in it. And I grew up with, rage and vengefulness, the deep desire to wound when wronged or disrespected. I learned those things. I learned rage and vengeance as the quote unquote most natural response to being wronged or disrespected. And I've had to work really hard, as you know, over the last 15 years to unlearn those parts of my upbringing. But somewhere in your childhood, in your upbringing, somewhere like deeply rooted in your home, you learned compassion as a response to harm, and I did not. Do you remember a few years ago during Yom Kippur, you wrote a letter, and you wrote a letter to a group of people who were shared friends with you and your ex when you were both married, and also when you were college students. And I wanted to bring that letter into our conversation because the letter was a letter that started the first line. Hello, everyone. It's Yom Kippur, right? A solemn
Yom Kippur.
Yom
I'm going to
Kippur.
correct you.
This is the American in me, child.
So it's the Jewish Atonement Day for those who don't know.
Yeah.
It's the biggest holiday in the year, and I'm Jewish. Yeah.
It's Yom Kippur. Say it again. Say
Yom
it.
Kippur. Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur. Is that French?
No, it's
Leave
Hebrew.
me alone. This is the letter started. It's Yom Kippur, a solemn day of reflection and atonement. And then the second line, most of you are aware that my ex-husband raped me when we were married. And I had to sit down. When I read that letter, because every line was precise and it was clear. You named all of the violence that you had experienced in your relationship. But most importantly, at least from my recollection, you named the participation in continuing violence against you by the refusal of this group of people to hold their friend accountable in any way for what had been done. With your permission, I want to share one particular paragraph. Can I do that now?
Yes, go ahead.
It's Yom Kippur, and as I reflect on the year to come, I am clear that I no longer want you to enact violence on me and my children, knowingly or unknowingly. With this knowledge of how your actions land on my body, my mind, and my spirit, it's your responsibility to stop the harm. I have not harmed you, as far as I know. And if I have done so unknowingly, I ask you for your forgiveness. And then at the end of that letter, you wrote an enumerated list of things that you wanted these former friends to do, like bullet pointed, right? To cease the perpetuation of ongoing violence against you. Like, I really, really remember that. And I remember that day thinking, in my very fraught relationship with God, that I knew that God lived inside of you because of your ability to write that kind of letter. A letter that was clear and precise, that asked for forgiveness for harm that you may have caused in those relationships with former friends. Can you talk about that a little bit, particularly because I know that there have been times when your faith has not served you quite as well in this process?
Yeah, wow. It took years of silent retreats to be able to get
No,
to that point.
I'm not gonna crack on those damn silent retreats anymore. I won't say another word.
to get me to that point, to be able to just oof. Yeah, I had completely forgotten about this because it was
No, I didn't.
That was a moment where of a pivotal point in my growth and in my relationship with the violence and the shame that I carried, and being able to separate what's mine, what's his, and what is others, that enable that. So I'm not a very religious person, more of a spiritual, but there's something about Yom Kippur and growing up Jewish, this the ritual, the annual ritual. So there's Rosh Hashanah and the fall, which is the Jewish New Year, and there's the period between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur where you're supposed to kind of like make promises of what you're going to be doing the next year, and kind of like let your actions guide you. And on Yom Kippur, a week or so after, you are judged. So for the year to come, and during that period, you're supposed to ask forgiveness of others. And I don't usually do that. I do some form of it, but nothing as deep as I was led that period to just, here I was committed to my relationship to social justice and to a better world, and I've done, and I was committed to doing my part. And then there's this friends and network who in public say that's what they are, but their private action towards me and my children was not aligned. And the lack of alignment on their part was also throwing me off, because if I wasn't very religious, and I mean, there's the way that my family practiced, as Ethiopian Jews, we're very much about the practice of doing, and as a diasporic person growing up here, my views around the world is collected from different parts. So there's what I inherited from my parents, but there's also the experience of me living in North America and knowing that morally I couldn't justify sending a Black man to jail because I knew that's not a place of healing, that's a place of further harm. And so I had to question, like, what's my role in this? Like, what am I participating as part of this bigger understanding of my relationship in the world? And I expected the friends to also be thinking of things in those ways, that we can't really separate our personal actions, how we relate to our friends, our families, our lovers, separate from the world. And I didn't know how much that really fucked, sorry my language, really fucked with my mind, this not being able to understand, like, these people that were the closest to me, the most intellectually aligned to me, like, for so many years. I tried to make sense of why couldn't, like, the experience that I got from you later on who didn't know me, and then there's the experience that from people who've known us, who were there before I was pregnant, who've known me, and who couldn't come up with something to support us and get through it. And so that was really painful, you know.
Yeah, I remember.
That's like this alternative family that I have, in a sense. It's just like I had to say thank you for allowing me to grow, to learn from you, and this is it. You know, I have to take care of myself, but you could continue still be part of the process, because he is still part of your circle, and you're still committed to social justice. You're still committed to a different world, a better world. So there's still work for you to do, but I don't have to be part of it. I no longer have to carry it. And so, my goodness. And then we went I went to the river with my kids, and we started, throwing pebbles into the river at sunset, and just letting go. And so, so there's, like, I know you spoke about your childhood and how you came to understand your relationship to rage. My part was very much about culturally the traditional role of women having to take care of everyone. And so I had to unlearn how to do that in order to, and not have compassion mask that as well. And so this thing that I'm still continuing to unlearn and learn at the same time is how to take care, but not fall into that traditional role of taking care.
Thank you. Do you remember how we came to sit at my kitchen table about 8 years ago? And it's been about 8 years. Do you remember how we got to that kitchen table? I think I had a bathrobe on. You came over.
I know. I feel like you should go get your bathrobe for it.
I don't have that bathrobe anymore, Chad.
You don't have that bathrobe?
No, girl, that bathroom was raggedy then. No, I got a new bathroom.
Which is why it made it so comfortable.
Yeah,
I think
I did. We didn't even really know each other, well at that time. We'd seen each other in community. Both of us had been engaged in reproductive justice work, postpartum support, work with Black women, and I think we'd bumped into each other a few times, but we barely knew each other then.
Yeah, I think I had met you at a friend's place amongst a gathering of other stuff, but I don't recall having had any one-on-one conversation with you, and I didn't even know you were still in the country.
Yeah,
I just remember that you were. Yeah,
because I lived in Nigeria a lot then. I was back and forth. I know, that was back and forth. But why? Why did you reach out to me? I mean, I want to hear you talk about this.
Yeah, so I reached out to you because by by the time I connected with you, I had already been divorced, but we were going through the courts again. So around custody issues and just some things that I thought, were straightforward. But then when I received the petition, there's something in there that just made me hesitate. And there was
the petition for
the divorce, the custody arrangement,
Right.
going back to court.
So it's a petition to change your custodial arrangement, right?
Exactly. And that I had a feeling that he was going to use my mental health as part of the custody conversation. So I had gone to get help like after this all, and I thought he would use that against me. And I didn't know other people whom I could trust with this with this information. And you were a lawyer, so I knew that much about you.
Oh, okay. You're using my lawyerliness.
Exactly. I was just like, because I was looking around, and I'm a very resourcul person, and I couldn't find any resources in Montreal who could respond to that, who could help me. And also because I wasn't working, I had to take time off, and I don't have the financial means to hire a private attorney as well. But I knew enough, having worked in the mental health sector, that could come and be used against me to get custody of the children. And so I just sent you a message on Facebook, and then you had the openness to just like, come on over, let me make you brunch. And then I opened the door, and then there you are with your lovely raggedy bathrobe.
It wasn't raggedy then. No, it wasn't raggedy then.
It wasn't raggedy. I loved it.
Now.
It's just like it was well loved and well held, and you just helped me. And during that conversation, my intention was never to tell you the details of what was going on, because earlier to that, I had reached out to two of my exes and my friends, and they hadn't come to my support in the way that I needed. And in fact, when they spoke to him, whatever conversation took place, he felt more emboldened.
I remember that, yeah.
And so, as far as I was concerned, they were the only one who could have done something in my situation. But I reached out to you, and the way you received me with so much, and you didn't know me, really, and you received me with such radical honesty, and you spoke about your experience of familial violence. And I don't know anyone who ever spoke about incest and the family in the same way as you did, with so much like just direct, it is what it is. And the way that, because you knew my ex, but I had no idea the extent of your relationship with him either. I didn't even know that, because they were just like parallel worlds. But when I told you, you were able to hold an understanding. Yes, there's this man who has contributed so much to Black, the Black world in Canada, and he's also the man who has raped you. The both could be true and are true. And so there was no ambiguity. There was of your understanding around violence. And for me, that was refreshing. That was like mind-blowing, So tell me how you come to think about those things in such clarity. Because for me, it's still like, and this was what, back in 2014? It's
13,
been 13, yeah. And to this day, I still haven't met someone as clear around violence as you, with so much of the intimate knowledge and able to hold, not just hold space, hold the role that people play in different ways. And I think there's more and more. I'm hopeful, but I would like to hear more about your process around how you came to that clarity.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I feel like I want to say thank you. Well, you've heard me talk about my friend Ari a bit. I went to Howard University, my beloved HU, in the 90s. And it was in my second year of college that a very, very close friend, engaged to one of my very best friends, a very close friend of mine was arrested and was charged with rape. So that would have been 1991, 92, 93, 1993. And his name is Ari. He still is someone who is in my life, not by direct contact, but his story and this experience has really shaped me. And so Ari was arrested and charged with rape, and he was convicted ultimately a year later in 1994 on a 15 to 45 year sentence for a charge of rape. They got him on one charge. And he's been in prison for 27 years. And when his trial was happening, I showed up to his trial. And after he was convicted, I very much continued to believe that he was wrongfully convicted, that he was innocent, that he had not raped someone. About a year later on campus, I was organizing with a group of Black women in response to a string of assaults that had happened on campus against Black women. And one of the assaults, as I recall, had happened. It was a gang rape that had happened in broad daylight on my campus. And so I'd organized with some Black women. We had a rally on the main yard. For those of you that know my beloved campus, there's a space we call the yard. It's a big green space, and it's surrounded by all of these buildings. And after the event, after the rally, I was sitting in front of one of the buildings where we had held the rally. I was sitting on some concrete stairs, and I was just taking in all that had happened. And there's a woman who approached me, and the sun was behind her, so I couldn't see her face, but she started thanking me for helping plan the rally. I didn't speak, I was very much in the background, but she just came up to say thank you. And she thanked me specifically for bringing attention to the impacts of sexual violence in the lives of Black women. And she ultimately sat down to my left on the stairs next to me. And she started to share that she had been raped on campus too, by someone that she had known, and someone that she had known and trusted. She shared that she had been raped by someone who had always been very kind and respectful to her when they encountered one another. Someone who was very, very smart and had, real Black consciousness as she had come to know him, and someone who had simply overpowered her one morning when he came to her room. She talked, I still think about this, she talked about the impact of the rape in her life, that she had taken time off and recently returned to school as a full-time student. She talked about depression. She talked about being in a body that was 40 pounds heavier as a self sort of protective gesture, coping mechanism. And she talked about not being believed by other Black women. And as she was sitting to my left, I was listening to her. And at some point, I realized that I'd seen the right side of her face in evidence photos, a face that had been marked with scratches and a neck that had abrasions on it when my friend Ari was arrested, shortly after he was arrested and during his trial. On those stairs, she was telling me exactly, what my friend had done to her. She was talking about Ari. And I believed her completely, I believed her completely, just as I believed you when you came and you sat at my kitchen table and you told me the story about a man who at the time was, a mentor and a friend. And, I hadn't thought about what had happened in college to me or with my friends in years. I'd really tried to block it out, I think, looking back. But that experience very much prepared me for our meeting. I felt prepared because of that experience to meet you.
One of my, again, the way you keep on blowing my mind then and now is you ready to jump in the fire because you believe.
Mm.
And I remember, like, I just felt held, and that it came from a place of love. And you continue to be that. So this whole work that comes from a place of deep love and understanding. Wow. And it's rare. It's rare, this like unconditional love that guides your work, this love for Black women, that I get from you and from Delise, who is another member of the collective.
Yes, we have to name our sister.
Yeah, and you asked me about what I needed and safety plan, like what did I need for me and my children.
Mm-hmm.
And so where did your understanding of safety plan, because I didn't know anything about transformative justice. You kind of pulled me in with other people as well, and you spoke about accountability and accountability circle, which again was very foreign to me at that time, like the practice of it, because I knew in my head, in my heart, that's what needed to happen. But and were you prepared in any way for what an accountability process would look like, or transformative justice? Where did those ideas, what's your relationship to those ideas, and how did you come to them?
I think at the time I had started to study, but I feel like this is the shift in the conversation a little bit, where I'm going to start talking about my family.
I was going to ask you about the blog and the stuff that you wrote about your family as well.
So what I remember, practically speaking, so in 2013, I started to just read about transformative justice. And it felt, I kept coming back to this idea of responding to harm and violence without doing more harm, responding to harm and violence without doing more harm. And it sounded totally abstract. And yet I knew it was something that I needed, because that's not who I was. Like I said earlier, you grew up somehow getting compassion, and I was like, I will fuck you up. I'll punch you in your face, whatever, And so I was really drawn to that idea. So part of it was just, I was studying, I was reading everything that I could. Had a really, was single parenting I had babies then. I think Sade was in diapers. Was she in diapers? If she didn't, she wasn't in diapers, but she was wild and unruly. She's still wild and unruly, but 11. She was young and wild. But I had 3 small children and a very contentious relationship with their father. And so I was just interested in what it meant, just like you said so beautifully, to let my children have a relationship with their father, to, keep whatever tensions existed in our relationship, at a bay, at as much distance as I could from them. But I wanted strategies to not respond to his aggression, his violence, as we were, just starting to undertake, the early stages of our divorce. Like, I really wanted strategies. What do you do? What do you do when someone is like waging war against you, intent on breaking your spirit for whatever reason, because you left, because of whatever, how do you not how do you not like inflame yourself or big yourself to do even greater harm in the context of that aggression? That is a question. And I knew enough to know that I believed deeply in some, like, a politics of abolition, let's just call it that. I believe that, our prisons, our policing systems, and, systems of state surveillance, all of those systems, including our foster care system, I knew they were profoundly broken, that there was no repair and fix that could be done. And so I think it was in those early stages, like I see this so clearly now, but the question that I was turning to was, well, how can we have this world without all of this stuff? If my natural response is to stab you or cut you, right? That instinct is in me when you harm or attack me. How do I, we can't, in short, I can't imagine a world without all of those institutions as they currently existed if I can't figure out not only how to destroy that instinct within me, but also think more seriously about what causes violence, what are the conditions that facilitate and cause violence. Those are the early stages of like starting to like piece that together. The family stuff was not nearly as clear then. I have a 15-year estrangement from my father because of the kind of brutal violence that existed in my home. And I really needed every single year of those 15 years to come back to him. But when I met you, I wasn't ready. That door was still firmly closed, but I was studying. I was also practicing. You and I think have talked a lot about what it means to practice transformative justice in the context of really deeply contentious parenting with former men or former partners who we want our children to have a relationship with, right? That's tough. That is tough work. So, I think that's where the early stage, that's how it was. That's what was happening when we met.
And where are you with that now?
We've come a long way. You know that I've come a long way. What do I want to say? I'll say this, that I had this 15-year estrangement from my father, and without our work together over the last, I guess, almost 8 years, there's no way possible that I could have even imagined opening that door. And I think more importantly, maybe I could have like pushed it open because I'm curious, but I would definitely not have had, I wouldn't have known what to do. I certainly would not have been able to walk into that relationship with my first and most important man, who was like crazy abusive, and know what boundaries I needed to be in right relationship with him. Our work has taught me that I knew exactly what boundaries to set. I've shared with you, I knew from our work exactly how to speak about violence with him. I knew what I needed to say. I knew exactly what an authentic relationship with him would look like, and was very much prepared to leave if it was not authentic. I wasn't going to be like the girl who like went to take care of him and offered to cook his meals and help him find a girlfriend. But our work has taught me everything about what I needed to be in place before I fully pushed open that door and walked into a relationship with my father, who, as it turned out, had Parkinson's and was very, very frail after 15 years. I think what I will say with the most honesty that I've shared with you, because I feel like you got to watch it real time. When I opened that door, I was like, okay, cool. I have these recorded conversations. I really challenged him. And then I was like, oh, wait, shit, we still have to talk. And now I need to figure out what boundaries I need to have a continuing relationship with him. I definitely didn't want to talk to him once a week once a month felt okay. And there was some real unevenness there as I had to figure out for myself what an ongoing relationship with my father looked like, with the right kind of boundaries intact that would allow me to preserve the kind of integrity as a woman, that I wanted, with someone who, was profoundly abusive, So our work has taught me that. Yeah. Our work has taught me that. I know one of the things that we wanted to share with folks before we open up conversation were some of the lessons, the real, and as pragmatic, right, as practical as we could be, the real lessons that we've learned over the last 8 years of studying, but also practicing transformative justice together. How does that feel? Are there things you want to add before we shift a little bit?
No, my head was going that same direction as you, and was thinking maybe practically describing to the audience here. There's all this conversation, alternative ways of, instead of going to the police, instead of going through the judicial system. So before we go into the questions, if you wanted to describe what the accountability process that we initiated, the first one was, or any of the other ones, and also to clarify to people so that there are risks. The kind of risk that involves, first of all, and us speaking today, just we've received cease and desist letters as well, even though we're not naming anyone, but that being one aspect of the risk of coming forward. So that's me personally as well. So being forced to engage with the legal system, even though we're doing the opposite. We're trying to do the opposite of that, go as far as way, but because of the perpetrators' tool of oppression and dominance is the judicial system being one, we have to come back and engage with that. So it's not a clear all or nothing. I think that's one thing that I would like for the audience to take place, and to get from that. It's just it doesn't matter what you want, someone else might bring you in. So you may want to have nothing to do, and it's all about abolition, but you still have to figure that part out. So that's one of our considerations. But did you want to speak about the process now, or do you want to move into the question and come back to it after?
Well, let's save it. Let's offer some of the practical lessons. I mean, we have, we're 8 years in. We have missteps. We have recalibration, we have profound growth and learning, and it feels really important to share. So first and foremost, transformative justice is a commitment to study and a personal practice. I think of it very much as lifetime work, everyday work. I've done yoga for over 20 years, so it's very much a practice. And it's a practice that we all, as collective members, practice locally. And by that, I mean with friends, family, loved ones, children, lovers, relatives, before we even think about branching wider. So that's been a really profound learning. TJ has to start at the smallest scale. The people that touch our skin and get under our skin most readily is where transformative justice begins. We can talk about political education a little bit. So transformative justice is the foundation of abolition. I've been thinking about this so much lately because we're in a moment where folks really want to talk about prison abolition, the politics of abolition. Transformative justice is the foundation. Without transformative justice, there is no world without prisons. There's no abolition. As transformative justice practitioners, people that engage in the practice, daily practice of it, what we're doing is we're in the process of learning how to first lessen harm and violence in the world, right? And two, we're learning how to respond to harm and violence when it does occur without like increasing it or fueling it. So, transformative justice is the bedrock, it's the foundation. I know abolition is often a lot more sexy, but transformative justice is the grit, it's the grit. Transformative justice is a practice that must simultaneously prepare community. I feel like this was one of the places that was most painful in the early years of our working together. In short, if you live in a community that is not knowledgeable, in an organizational context, right? If you live in a community that doesn't have a tradition of transformative justice, that's not really knowledgeable of transformative justice and then how accountability works, you're just gonna get hit with some violence until, if you try to engage in a formal accountability process or transformative justice practices more widely. It's, what I think now is that wherever I live, I'm in Halifax now, we have to think of all the ways that we need to sort of prep our people as we're thinking of transformative justice outside of our home spaces and our interpersonal spaces. We really have to think about what kind of needs exist in our community. How can we prepare our community? Maybe it's political education. Here in Halifax, we have a monthly study group. Folks just come in, we read really short online pieces. We walk away with a practice, we come back, we report. It's a learning space, popular education. It's a learning space. And we try to leave with something really practical while we're away for a month so that we can report back in. What else? You need, I'll let you, I'll say maybe one more thing and then I'd love to hear what you think, Heru. You absolutely need a ride or die pod. Like you need people that are going to go down with you when you get those cease and desist letters. You need folks that really are going to return to one another. In the context of our work, we have had disagreements. We have had really frustrating moments with one another. We have had moments where I have absolutely been devoid of any capacity. So we have established two things consistently. One, from our training with the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective, Enough Respect, their core and anchor model. Google it, it has saved our behinds. And essentially what it is someone who is core, has the capacity to be in the heat, in the fire of whatever's going on in your collective or in your community, is ready to show up at a woman's house, to pick somebody up, to, do a fundraiser, to do whatever needs to be done in the context of whatever violence is happening. You need somebody who has the capacity, and anchor is, someone who's like, I can't be there for every meeting. I have these other priorities right now, but here are the things that you can rely on me to do. I can do note taking at our meeting. I'm happy to send out the reminder for the next meeting, but I can't do, the daily grit. And it's a really important practice because, the core and anchor model is also a process that transforms you. You learn to be more honest, to budget your time better, to prioritize. So, it's a model that transforms you as well. And then the second thing that I feel really proud is that we haven't burned each other. We have been together. We have returned to one another. We have not betrayed one another. We are here and we struggle and we love each other. And I don't know, I'm just really proud of that. Really, really proud of the integrity and love that we have for one another, So.
Yeah, I think that was the pleasant surprise, because after we started like supporting him, supporting, it was a pleasant surprise because I remember because initially when we started, it was just supporting me, my immediate needs, and when I felt I was, stable, then spoke about starting up an organization, a collective, the Third Eye Collective. And we would have our meetings, and our meetings were so much full of love and laughter as we're talking.
And wine, don't forget the wine and the food.
Yeah, wine and food. And that's like a key strategy. It's like we organized around your kitchen table, beautiful
Mhm.
kitchen table.
Mhm.
We fed each other, we nurtured each other, and all the time talking
Mhm.
about these super heavy
Mhm.
topics,
Mhm.
but coming in and leaving lighter and supported. So
Mhm.
that whole, I think what you spoke of, the pod that is clear, has so much clarity around violence, so that when you're being gaslit by other people, like, no, there's other people that, you know, that will guide you back to just
Mhm.
be able to tell the difference with what's taking place. And transformation is such a key word, and that
Mm.
people not be attached to the outcome. Because if it was about the outcome, my goodness, like, we'll be, you know, our work wouldn't really have much to show for. But throughout the process, we have transformed ourselves,
Mhm.
and as a result,
Mhm.
been a lot more impactful.
Mhm.
You know, you spoke about radical honesty, and so yeah, I think it's like my takeaway is that, like, so lead from a place of love,
Mhm.
gather those who have same values as you as around violence, and learn about harm reduction, because it,
Mhm.
again, it's
Yeah.
not about the outcome, because if it was about the outcome, we wouldn't have gotten too far. But we took
Mhm.
a harm reduction approach to what was going on with me, with what was going with other people we ended up supporting later on.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a key tool that people may want to learn more
Mhm.
about. Um, so
Mhm.
yeah, I think you touched on the major stuff, but like, we have to teach and learn the same way that we've learned, and that it takes time. And it's one step forward, two steps back, and we will make mistakes along the way. Um, and when working in this, I know as people, a survivor-led organization,
Mhm.
we get triggered. I get triggered. And
Mhm.
so shit happens when you get triggered. So there
Mhm.
has to be space in there for that. Like, what happens when one of us is triggers, and
Mhm.
how does that impact our organizing, how we
Mhm.
support, who's able to step
Mhm.
in, who needs to step back, and
Mhm.
prioritizing our self-care, I
Mhm.
think is key.
Mhm.
And I always appreciate you always just being quiet when I mess up.
Am
And
I
then
quiet?
you go into your really extra calm voice, and you're like, pronounce each word, and that's how I know I fucked up. But
Oh, I don't know what
but
that is, but that's
no,
hilarious
but
to
you
me.
know what? It is. You don't even know it, but you take so much care, and
Mm.
how you speak to me. For me, that's like kind of like, oh, I need to pay attention, maybe a little bit more
This is so funny to me.
to what I'm doing. But like, you're not chastising me. You're
Mm.
not,
Yeah.
pulling out
Mhm.
the whip. But I know
Mhm.
in those moments, the way that you've supported me
Mhm.
is like, I've learned through listening to your tone of voice, uh, care, and also boundary, or areas where I
Mm.
need to pay more attention to.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so, yeah,
Thanks for saying that. That's gonna
yeah,
make
yeah.
me
You
giggle.
didn't even
I'm
know.
gonna follow up with
I
you
know.
offline
I
because
know.
I don't know
I
that
never told
voice.
you that. I know you're not even aware of it, but
Listen,
and I never
we
mentioned
have
it.
a million questions. We got to get in
Okay.
there because
All right.
let's get some conversation going. Do you want to pull them open?
Are you on the Google Doc
I'm in
or?
there. Yep,
Okay,
because
let me
that
see.
our wonderful tech support has just been putting the questions in there for us.
Oh shoot, you're not
Um,
joking. Okay.
so I really appreciate that a number of people have shared transformharm.org. That is
Hmm.
the resource. Go
Yep.
dig around. So yeah, that's a resource. There's case examples on there that are very
Hmm.
helpful. Do you want to respond to any of these? Do you want me to read some?
Sure. I'm looking. Maybe why don't you take a couple, and then let me see, maybe around family and birth and stuff. Maybe I could respond to
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Okay.
So, so the alternative to calling 911. Remember?
Is that a question? Do you want to read? Is there a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a question. The first question, which
Mhm.
is, we very often get client contact to get support for domestic violence and addiction problems. Women are
Mhm.
suffering but not willing to speak out to any counselors formally, even not
Mhm.
willing to report 911 when being tortured by the husband. And I'm confused in how to deal with that. So you know what, this reminds me of that situation when I went to
Yep.
support a mom as a doula, not knowing that I was entering a situation of
The woman who had just
domestic
given
abuse.
birth.
Yeah, well, when I initially saw her, she was a few weeks before giving birth,
Mhm.
and her partner wasn't allowed to be in the
Mhm.
house. And there's like longstanding issue of domestic violence and so forth. And obviously, she didn't want to call the cops in as well, because it was just going to bring more negative attention to a already volatile
Share it.
situation.
Can you share that scenario, because it's really important, and it's a moment when I was so proud of your brave. I don't know what else to say, but bravery.
Yeah, that was the first time I was experienced. So yeah, so this is a woman with her partner who's a lot of domestic violence over the years. They had a couple of kids, and she was pregnant, and I came in, and then she shared that she didn't want him around, but because she lived in a housing situation, neighbors were complaining, and if he came around, she was going to get evicted. And so there was like housing was a key concern to her as well. And he had agreed to stay away, but what happened was that after she gave birth, he came over to the house. And so initially that was okay, but she wasn't comfortable with it. She managed to get him away, but then we had to come up with a plan very fast.
Safety plan.
Because he was a safety plan. And there was a newborn in the picture, and she lived alone with a couple of other kids. And what we ended up doing was we pulled in a few of our anarchist friends. And this is where I just want to say where white allies really came into the picture.
Know how to use your white allies and teach them their boundaries.
Yeah. So we spoke about having them present to counter so these were like, I think, people who lived around the neighborhood as well, so who could come at any given moment when she called. And so we just tapped into that resource, and they came in. I got a call. I ended up staying with her as well for that initial week where it was high intense. And they addressed it. So it was a harm reduction plan where they spoke to the guy, and they managed to calm him down enough so he would leave. We didn't end up calling the cops, but this is one instance where we had to think creatively outside of the box to keep her safe, the baby safe, and listen. I think we really had to listen to what she wanted. You know, it wasn't about imposing what we thought was best for her to be safe, but we had to go with what she was comfortable with, because that's what will maintain, I think, more transparency. And
are you going to tell the real part of the story, how you went to sleep over there? Oh,
and he came up the stairs.
Oh, that's the point.
That's the point.
So part of the safety plan. Yeah, I didn't.
Yes,
so part of the safety plan is that you had decided with our ally, our friend, that you were both going to go over. Am I right? And you were going to just crash on the couch in case he came pounding on the door in the middle of the night. And so, you know, that was the plan. We had our sort of our personal 911 contacts. And you gotten all settled, the house was calm, everything locked up. You laid down on the couch, but we forgot to secure the patio door. Right?
Oh shit, I forgot about that.
I did it?
Because my memory is bad. Yes.
Tell the story. And he came through he climbed up the balcony, he was drunk, came onto the patio and came in the house. And then what?
And then he came, and then I was just like, oh. hi. It's a good thing I had met him prenatally.
Yeah.
So he thought I was there within the context
Right.
of caring for the
Giving
baby.
postpartum support, right?
Yeah, and so I just had to talk him down at the same time as calling in
Right, support.
the support in. And it was scary. It was
I
scary as
remember.
hell.
Yeah.
It wasn't the safest plan for me or for
Mhm.
her or for anyone involved, but it luckily it ended up being well. But yeah, so that's yeah, disclosure. I have a really bad memory, but Rachel, thank goodness, doesn't.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, that's one example. For time's sake, I'd like to know from
Yeah.
Rachel how she reconciled that sudden knowing that her convicted friend actually was guilty. Did she ever talk to him about what she did? Was there any way to come to terms with who she knew him to be or thought he was and what he actually did and did not take responsibility for? No. So I've never spoken to Ari, not in 27 years. And I realized not long ago that he's actually incarcerated in my mother's hometown, like 5 miles from where my mother's family, who I'm still very close to, has grown up. There are extensive court records online, even with the Supreme Court of the US, because he has been very active in trying to get paroled and have his conviction overturned. He's also been very active in challenging the abuse that he's encountered as like a very radicalized, dreadlock wearing, brilliant Black man in prison. What I've understood also from reading his court documents is that he has insisted that he is innocent. That's more difficult for me. I think that when our borders are open and I'm back in my mother's hometown for my annual visit, I think that I could reach out to him and ask for a face-to-face. I feel like I'm ready. I still believe that he, yes, committed an act of rape, and feel like my body's ready to be in front of someone who insists that he didn't do it. And still have a conversation that's grounded in knowing and compassion. And that comes from growing up with my father, who is brilliant, who is has a very tender side, but has done really horrific things in our home. And when I finally was able to open up the door to our relationship in 2018, after watching the what documentary was it? The documentary. Who's the Black music producer? Come on, who produced everything? Hey, Root, help me. Anyway, I watched this documentary. Not R. Kelly. Older gentleman. Quincy Jones. Praise,
Okay.
y'all.
Yeah.
After I watched the Quincy Jones documentary, I was like, oh shit, like that's my dad. And I was profoundly moved by Quincy Jones' relationship with his mother. It's a place where I saw, like, for the first time in my own, I could take issue with Quincy Jones, but I saw this real tenderness and vulnerability. His mother was mad. And, you know, he told the story of being next to her and his palms would sweat, you know. Anyway, I made a call to my dad, had the same number. That opened a door. But my relationship from 2018 until he died just a few months ago was one in which I got to prepare myself for my eventual meeting with Ari. Because my father will admit to certain things, but not admit to other things. It was really important, you know, when I opened that door, that I was really clear about what I wanted out of my first visit. And what I wanted out of my first visit, I flew to him, was family history. So I have, and I feel really blessed and honored to have hours and hours of interviews that I did with my father about who our people were, and importantly, about the kind of violence that he lived through as a little boy in Newark, New Jersey. So I feel like I'm ready. I'm ready to see Ari, but no, he's never confessed. And in fact, what I see in court records is it's exactly the opposite. So thanks for that question. Hey, Root, do you want to take another one?
Yeah, so there was a question around white allies. So the question was, I work with a subsidized family mediation and information service provider. Sorry. Let me just leave that. But I mentioned white allies. So think of anarchists. White anarchists have really been helpful to us because they're counter the state. So if you're thinking about having safety plans, work with your local anarchist organizations and figure out a plan, at least, even if you're not going to use it. All of this is think ahead of time what that might look like to have a relationship with white anarchists who are not, if something was to happen and there's like I said, an encounter with the cops, that they're able to take the blunt of it. And it's not going to be a racialized person. It's not going to be a Black person who has to deal with the potential fatality of being in conflict. So that has been my lesson about, like, well, how do you work with white people? You know, it's not all white people, but there's some who share your values around safety.
Can I add a but, or do you want to keep going?
No, go ahead, and then I'll go to the next question.
And I'll say, this other arc of my universe is my background in implicit bias. So I do tons of work, facilitations around, I call it critical implicit bias. And it comes from my training as someone who works in with archival materials and writes about history a lot. Anyway, I'll add the but, and the but is, it's important to be in relationship with white people and be very, very clear that the spaces that we deem as, left of center, radical, social justice centered, liberal, whatever your term is, are the spaces where the most difficult issues of anti-Black racism show up, because they are so hotly contested as not existing there. And the same, if not deeper and more difficult, because they're so intractable in many instances. The most difficult instances about anti-Blackness that I've encountered have come from those spaces, and engaging in work with very radical white people who are, trans, kicked out of their family, anarchists, let me just keep adding. But in those spaces, the refusal to understand their own swallowed, internalized anti-Blackness has been profoundly difficult. One of the things that we, tried, I guess, about 2 years ago was in lieu of allowing a beloved little boy who was part of our community to be placed in foster care, taken away from his mother, God, in Quebec of all places, and really like taken away from us as his extended family. We cobbled together very experimentally an alternative foster care arrangement, and it backfired. It was disastrous. And I had maybe a 2.5-year relationship with this family beforehand. We're now at like the 4.5-year mark. I have had to work very hard to build the trust and care in my relationship with this child's mother, because the alternative foster arrangement that we established with this white anarchist queer couple was maddeningly difficult because of the refusal to understand their own internalized anti-Blackness, not just as it related to this beautiful little boy, but as it related to his mother. And so, I just feel like, yes, there are things that we need and we can learn from each other. But we also have to keep our eyes wide open about the kinds of anti-Blackness that really embed themselves in the spaces that are filled with the greatest kinds of refusal, where we think they may not exist. We got to keep our eyes open. And then, just one other thing, and then we'll switch to a question. Move at the speed of trust, right? This comes from so many of my teachers. Move at the speed of trust. There's a reason we sat around my kitchen table drinking wine and eating together for almost a year before we really undertook any other work outside of that table space. And it's because we really needed to see each other and take time monthly. We got together monthly. We needed that time to build trust bonds with one another. So that was a hard lesson.
Yeah. Thank you for that reminder, Rachel. It's so important, and emphasizes back to what really matters, which is relationships. So take the time that it needs to build a trusting relationship, because if we talk about some of our encounters with other Black women, other people in the Black community who understood racism but did not understand violence towards women, and so they couldn't show up for us in the way that we needed, and ended up perpetuating further harm, secondary harm. And so know who you're working with and invest in relationships, and because that's, that is key. One of the questions that came, I'm going to read it. It says, I work with a subsidized family mediation and information service provider in Toronto. I was wondering if, while going through separation divorce process, whether court was the only option, or if you felt it would have been safe to try alternative dispute resolutions options like mediation or collaborative family law. I know that the resolution process chosen depends on each person's ability to be supported and feel safe. So I understand sometimes alternative courts are not always feasible. Very good question. And I would say, like, it's not all mediators, because you, like all the other practitioners, you want to be able to get someone who understands violence. And then the way that mediation takes place, for example, like in my case, I had to go through mediation, but I could not be in the same room as someone, as the person who has harmed me. It was just, at that time, it was too much. And so I tried to communicate with the mediator. Can I talk to you over the phone? Can there be a different room? And I did the cold calls first, and some of them were like, no, this is not how we do this. You have to be in the same room. So you don't want to get into that space, because that enacts further harm. And I would say, like, no matter what system is, make sure that the person has a mental health safety plan. And I mean, in the sense of, some of the stuff is like, well, what kind of support do we need beforehand, during, and afterward, and with the kids as well. So in order to be present and parent in the way that the person needs to. So that was like an ongoing safety plan on how to interact and share space with the abuser. And so in terms of the courts system, I can't really speak to that, because I think each case's situation is different. It also depends, are you on legal aid, or do you have a private, an attorney that charges you $400 an hour and could just do the job efficiently? And so there's so many other considerations to that. Rachel, do you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I just feel like you have more expertise here than I do.
Yeah, I think that we really invest in people who understand harm reduction, violence, have a list of resources of different professionals that you could direct them, so that the person, so that the survivor is not the one who has to do this work from scratch. So if anything, I would invite people to do from today's session is put together that list, and already that is something that is huge, because the idea of going around and telling your story over and over, that's not healthy. So that's how you could help someone help themselves.
That's great. Do you want to pull another question for us? Thank you.
Yeah, so the other one was when I think domestic violence during COVID, and how women are often isolated from family and friends when experiencing violence, how has stay-at-home orders, lockdown, and the virus amplified these cases of violence, especially since shelters have been turning away victims due to overcrowding?
I mean, I can say something. Do you have something you want to respond first here, Ruth?
Well, I could say from the perspective of pregnancy, as we know that violence escalates during pregnancy as well. And so you could be strategic in terms of making sure that the person has a doula,
Yeah.
for instance, and so use that as an excuse, the pregnancy, an indirect way to maintain communication and safe words. But it has gone up. It yeah, I haven't come across any good plans out there, but I just know, like, if you have a doula birth support person, that helps.
Yeah.
That helps.
So I obviously, I don't have any clear answers here. I can share what I've done. There are two families who I have long-term relationships with. Both have mothers and children's in each home, right? And one of those homes has a mother, a partner, and then children in it, and a baby. And both of those homes have, you know, varying challenges, and the home with the parents in it, or the partner, the mother, and the children, has had ongoing violence in it. And so, you know, this is why harm reduction, understanding transformative justice, or understanding harm reduction as transformative justice in the interpersonal sphere, is so important. So in both homes, I've just used Zoom in a myriad of ways. So I have a 12-year-old, she's gotten really good at Zoom babysitting, you know, the kids on both sides, as a way of just creating support. So, you know, it was every day for a while when COVID hit. She would just hop online and spend an hour, hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours playing Roblox, you name it, but figuring out how to use Zoom as a way of just sort of creating a buffer around the children in the home. You know, as a single mom, still a single mom, I find that profoundly important in ways that we often don't think about. If you have a trust relationship with someone who has children, and you are able to, an hour or an hour and a half of time, engaging a child in a myriad of ways through Zoom, whether it's just sharing a screen, playing Roblox together, sharing a video, using the pad to draw together. There's so many cool apps that you can share online with children. I do use those for my students. Can create an enormous buffer of time, support for the mom, and obviously something really soft for a child that's in a home that often doesn't feel good. In the instance of the other family, you know, I tried a few times to come in by Zoom when actual violence had just happened or was about to pop off. And it was like a moment when, you know, the man would be like screaming, disparaging, you know, F you, bitch, you know, to the woman who I've had the longest relationship with, and their children in the house. And I've tried on a number of occasions to come in, and of course, you know, just greet him and say, hi, you know, I'm here. I have a trusting relationship with him. I hear that shit is just really hard today. You know, do you both want to take some time and try to talk to me about what's going on? How can I help you? Am I helpful? Do you want me to go? And what I will say is those times have left me feeling like, oh shit, I don't think I can do this. I was just so triggered on one of those calls because I feel like my presence didn't really help, and actually left me feeling absolutely terrible inside. Like I know what happens in my body when I've crossed a threshold of my capacity, right? That's a really important thing to know in this work. Have you crossed over that threshold and you feel like totally out of control, like you want to drink? Okay, and it's daytime. That's how I know. So what I've done with that family is just, you know, pick up the phone, lots of texts, you know, can you go on a walk, take the baby for a walk, call me. And I just, you know, a friend of mine taught me this years ago, a lot of times, you know, harm reduction work in the context of this world we're living in that is impossible. We can't change it. We can't change the conditions of poverty, of whatever that's in that home. You know, the harm reduction looks like just taking the call, listening. Girl, no way. Are you serious? Come on, hanging out, budgeting, you know, take that hour out of your day, listen, you know, don't judge, be present. I mean, I feel like a lot of our work is often just listening, taking calls, you know, of course, you know, piecing together oftentimes very practical stuff, whether it's support kits, winter boots, fundraiser for rent, But often it's just harm reduction looks like, go and take a walk, call me, take a long walk. I'll listen to you for an hour. One of the things I try to do in that house that has ongoing violence in it is just always greet the man when I come up in that space, however I come in, whether it's to say hello to one of the kids or ask to see the baby, or talk to the mama who I've known for the longest time. If he's there, whatever's going on that day, oh, could you just make sure to greet X for me? Oh, hey, could you call X in the room and let me just greet him? I want to see his face. I want to say, how you doing today? What's going on? That's really, really important to me. I don't know. I mean, we are, real time in an emergent fashion, developing piecemeal strategies. And I mean, that's the best we got. That really is. So do you want to say anything else, Hayroot?
No, we have a lot of questions. I'm just
okay. Let's go. Yep, let's go. All
right. So there are a couple of questions about families.
Okay.
For you and for me. And so for you, I guess, how can you reestablish a relationship with your father if he denies, deflects, minimizes, etc.?
I mean, that's a great question. It turned out that he was kind of ready. I mentioned that he had Parkinson's. I had no idea. So when I got to him, my father was always someone who was physically, profoundly physically violent as a tall, very strong man. And so, I mean, I'm just going to say this out loud. There was something about facing him in a wheelchair with Parkinson's that that I was just really okay with. Like, I knew that we would have something to build on. I don't know quite what to do with that feeling. I mean, he was in a wheelchair those last 2 years of his life. What I will say is that he was profoundly, I'm my father's favorite, right? And so he was profoundly grateful when he heard my voice on the other end of that phone after 15 years. He was open. And when I first saw him, I was really clear about what I needed. And I literally was like, there was violence around things like domestic labor, his expectations of what women should do in the home, cook, clean, have sex, serve him. And so one of the first things I did when I got literally to his house was said to him, I'm so happy to see you. I really needed those 15 years to come back to you. And I just want you to know, I'm not going to cook or clean for you while I'm here, right? I'm not going to fix your meals. He had a nurse coming in to do those things, for a few hours a day, and she was doing those things anyway. But it was really important for me to say that, I'm not going to be like that little girl again. I'm not going to be your substitute wife. I'm not going to do that. And what I'll say too is I think we wouldn't have been able to have 2 years before he died if there had not been also an openness in him. It was not a full openness. Absolutely not. I think I shared this with you, Hayroot, in our first meeting, maybe the second day or third day of my visit, he said to me, Rachel, all I need is a good woman. If I could just find me somebody, a good woman. And I had a Miss Seeley moment. It was straight up like, and what I said to him, I listened, I did not interrupt him. And I brought my chair. He was in a wheelchair, right? So I brought my chair over close to him so that our knees almost touched. And I said to him, why do you think that God would ever send you another woman after you have hurt so many women who have loved you? Why would you think that you deserve that? And I remember the look on his face. I mean, he was just like, he pulled back in his wheelchair and kind of sat in. And then he turned his head and he looked at me. And I knew he couldn't reach me because he couldn't even stand up, But that was a really important moment, again, a 15-year in the making moment. But let's move on. But what I will say is that if he had not been ready at all, that door would have had to close. If he had been, as defiant as I had left him 15 years prior, oh no, and so there was something really beautiful in his transformation of not having a single one of us. There are 5 of us in total. He didn't have a single person in his life at the end of his life. So he was transformed too, you know. I worked with what I had.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that example of just sticking with it and watching you grow as a result of that process. It's huge. I don't know if I could do that, but I know it can be done. So because of the time, I'm thinking there's quite a few questions, but I want to take this one question and maybe speak to the specific of what an accountability process actually is and the risk associated to the harm. I don't know if you could tie that in. So the question is around the letter that I wrote to family and friends. It says, what are your feelings around family and friends that sit back and don't help or assist due to their quote unquote love for the perpetrator? Do you see it as violence against the victim? So I was wondering if you could respond to that and tie it in with how the accountability process has worked or
not worked.
Or not worked.
I feel like I need your help here. So what I will say is that I still feel that, you know, when we talk about transformative justice, you know, we're talking about, you know, responding to harm and violence without making it bigger, without doing more harm. And an accountability process, in our experience anyway, has been like the most ideal. Like we have only reached that place 2 or 3 times over the last 8 years, right? And by accountability process, I mean someone who is harmed, someone who has been harmed. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep that binary there just for a moment. But 2 people deciding that they want to be engaged in a healing process with someone or 2 that they trust to hold that process over a long period of time. That doesn't happen very often. And what I'll say is that the one, you know, I have one ongoing right now and it's incredible. It's taught me about everything that's possible. And it is teaching me, you know, maybe more than it's teaching the folks that are involved. I don't know if they know that. I guess what I will say is that in most instances, there's a big fuck you. I'm not going to do anything, especially if someone is powerful, protected, insulated, well-loved, cute, whatever. And then, you know, accountability often looks really different than having 2 people at a table with trusted facilitators guiding this healing process. You know, it has to be creative and emergent. What I will say, I mean, hey, Ruth, this is where I really need you. My early heartbreaks in the first few years of our work came from Black women who said, no, it's not my business. Or he's my friend. He's a good guy. I'm sorry, but that's where I stand. Yeah, the greatest heartbreaks in this work have come in those moments, at least for me. Would you want to jump in here? I feel like you have so much that's rich to say and share.
Yeah, for me, it's the initial harm is something of the past, but I think the ongoing harm that's perpetuated from witnesses or I believe you and I believe him, you know, kind of attitudes, they have been the most painful and harder to shed. So over the years, my focus has really turned into like, what's the role of witnesses? What's the role of organizations? Let's take it outside of this like one-on-one dynamic between the person who has harmed and the person who is being harmed and the responsibility of others. So for example, I think of organizations like, you know, kind of like what you mentioned is like, what's their responsibility? So as an organization, like, what's your policy if someone within your organization comes and tells you, hey, my coworker has harmed me, like, and let's take it out of HR because HR is going into the legal framework, right? It's not about legal rights or responsibility, but like in another way, let's start practicing a different way of engaging and addressing conflict and harm. And so if someone comes to you and says like, the organizer or someone in the organization has harmed me, how would you respond? If you have an event like this and someone else contacts you afterwards or in different ways, like, what is your responsibility? Because I could say one thing, like doing nothing is enabling.
Mhm.
And so doing nothing is also taking a stand. And so even if it's to acknowledge it in some way or not, do it, and start having this conversation internally is what I would say as organizations, so that people could practice and then take it home, as something that's not so close to them.
I'm afraid our time together has come to an end. I just want to share with you, in case you weren't watching the toolbar at the end, Rachel and Harut, that you had at one point over 1,200 people at your kitchen table today. And we thank you so much. Some of the words I just pulled from the chat box, powerful, inspiring. And we just want to express how honored we are and grateful to you for making the time and for inviting us into your conversation today.